Hold on a second. I have to the questions this week, I had my tornado warning machines on over the weekend, just turning them off because their battery's running low. We had some severe weather here. Stop the beeping. Okay, yeah. So we've gone back and forth, like the creating of the Augur config file. Initially with Augur, I would say for the first, I don't know, until about 2 years ago, everything that was needed to start up Augur in terms of parameters was in a configuration file. We thought it would be easier to manage in a database, but now we're flipping back to a config file because actually for a lot of folks where they have problems with the database, it's easier if everything is in a file that they can read. The key orchestrator is something that allows you to orchestrate the tokens left per hour on a API key for a platform, and when they go invalid or are no longer good, just putting them to the side so they don't get used again. API endpoint docs. Occasionally there's messages that get deleted, but we'll have the message, and so, or a reference to the message, and so sometimes links are dead, just handling that. This singleton repos in a repo group, when an org is added, this is kind of a complex piece of logic around how people add things to an Augur instance. So for example, if I were to go in and add Kubernetes to my Augur dashboard, then I would see Kubernetes on the Augur dashboard. But then if somebody else went in and added the Kubernetes organization, we would want them to be in the same repo group inside of Augur. And so just sort of having some logic to account for that inconsistent addition, because the way that it works when you add a repo to an Augur instance is that repo is added so that anyone else who adds it will also have the data right away. So we don't collect the data for the same repo twice. So hundreds of people, thousands of people can have lists of repositories, and we only collect the data once for each repository, regardless of the amount of overlap. And then there's a work list for cloud native Augur, which we're working with Red Hat directly to make Augur more easily deployable on a Kubernetes-like infrastructure. And that will be pretty awesome, but it requires some refactoring of some of the core pieces of Augur. So yeah, that's what's happening right now. So Cooper, I gave you a lot of long answers and introductions to your questions about what this group does.
Oh, that was great. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the overview. One thing I noted, like you said that project boards are attached to organizations. You do know you can attach them to repos as well, I believe.
You can.
Yeah, I've done that at some point, so I can I'll have to get in there and remind myself how, but
Yeah, I would love to know how to do that. That would be awesome.
So I will say that we have had attempts at attaching projects to the repo directly before. The issue that we have with that is that when you open an issue on a project board, because it, uses issues, that opens the issue on the repository directly, as if it was an issue that was submitted by like someone else normally. It's just a regular issue. And we use the issues on the Augur repository as like problems, not like what GitHub sort of semantic issues are. And so we want to keep sort of our roadmap separate from like problems, because problems are things that need to be fixed now, and the roadmap that we use our project for are things that don't necessarily need to be fixed right now, or are not necessarily fixes in the first place.
We could create tabs for like bug fix kinds of things, which I think is what you're talking about.
Yeah. Also, when someone creates a project and then adds like 30 million issues, I also get like a ton of notifications for that. And I prefer to keep those separate.
Yeah, fair enough. The way we've been using it is, I think we have a similar thing where you've got kind of like issues which are coding issues, and then you've got sort of tasks to be solved. And so we're using project boards for both. We've just split, like we're using different repos for those two cases. So we've got like a coding repository and we've got a project admin kind of repository. And so that's where those tasks go. But yeah, if it's helpful, I like just checked, and yeah, like when you go to, I can drop it in the chat. This is our repository, and if you go there, you can see, like you can click on, that's one of our repositories, and the projects tab in that shows all of the project boards that I've linked to that repository. So if it's helpful, can remind myself how to do that. I think it's just in the settings of project boards, but it sounds like maybe, John, that wouldn't actually be ideal for you.
Yeah, I
Like-
mean, there are times when we will have someone create a project in Augur and then open like 30 or 40 issues, and then me as someone who's sort of responsible for like following up on these issues, I'm always sort of sitting there freaking out like, okay, are these relevant to me? Do I need to be the one triaging these and fixing these, or what's happening? Why are there so many issues being filed right now? And so that's one of the reasons that we like to keep it in a different repo. So if that's possible to do without having the like completely separate repo, then I would love to figure out how to do that. But that's what we are doing right now.
Couldn't we use a different project entirely for that kind of stuff, John? Or a different project board? Like Cooper, so these are all tied to the repo itself here?
Yeah, I mean, the way I understand it is projects are, they're independent, so you can attach them to any number of repos, and I think that's just where they show up. If you're on that repository, then they show up in that projects tab.
Ah,
Because when you create an issue through the project board, you have to, you can make a draft in the project board, but once you've turned it into an issue, you have to attach it to a repository. So
right.
that's the point at which you commit a particular issue to a repository. But yes, I think from my playing around, I think the project boards are kind of independent and you can just link them to a number of repositories, but I need to check that.
Yeah,
Well,
I think the other thing that might happen, like I think I know what you're talking about here. Like if I was just add an item, um, and I click create a new issue, it gives you a repository to check right here. Oh.
Yep.
So I honestly don't know why I've only got 2 repositories to choose from now. This is interesting. In the past, I had multiple repositories and Augur would appear at the top, so. Weird. I honestly don't understand what maybe something Andrew did when he created this other current iteration board made it easier to figure out. Now I'm completely lost on how the issues work. But I think the other thing that could possibly have been happening when people chose Augur is that we are the first repository alphabetically in the Chaos project. So it may have just been something that is invisible at the top. You don't even know you're picking it. So that actually could be the primary source of problem. That's interesting.
You can also transfer issues to different repositories, I've noticed.
Yeah,
So
I've
people are doing.
We
That
also
is-
learned that.
Yeah.
And the reason we learned that is because it caused some problems with our collection logic. That was a fun one, figuring out what is happening with this issue just disappearing.
Yeah, that could cause problems.
Yeah. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about the Wisdom Project, Cooper? I was just looking at it and it looked kind of interesting.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, I mean, it's the same project I presented the other day in that lightning talk. But for those of you that weren't here, it's a new framework that we're developing that allows any community to value any contribution. And so this could be ideas, actions, resources, and it uses a really simple and inclusive evaluation mechanism, which is just pairwise comparisons. And basically, the unique feature that we do is we treat these pairwise evaluations as like a baseline unit of value to the community. So we consider them valuable contributions in their own right. We assign them with a sort of a standard unit of value, and then we use that to peg the valuation of every other contribution. And what this means is that people only ever need to do these really simple pairwise comparisons, comparing contributions against other contributions. Sometimes they're comparing a contribution against some number of pairwise comparisons. So that's where it gets meta and a little bit more cognitively confusing, but on a user level, it's still really simple. You're still just comparing A versus B. And then just through those two really simple processes, we can calculate the score for every single contribution. And yeah, so that README that you're in right now kind of goes through the basic information. There's like a wiki there with a little bit more information as well. But we've prototyped through spreadsheets with various different communities and shown that the same model works in the arts, sciences, decentralized communities. Basically, any community could adopt it, and it outputs interoperable units. So that's the real key feature, is that two communities that are using the same mechanism could have comparable units, and they could start talking the same language and exchanging value. Yeah, and so currently building an MVP, and like I've been shouting on the Chaos channel and everywhere else, we need front-end support if anyone knows anyone.
And for the when you say contribution, are you what counts as a contribution? Like, it's one of those words that it could mean many things. When you say contribution, what do you mean?
Yeah, it's up to the community, really. Like, the mechanism is agnostic to what the community calls a contribution. When we've been prototyping, we've prototyped at festivals. So in that case, a contribution is, say, DJ sets that people did, cleaning the toilets, volunteering, sort of things that go into a festival. We've prototyped at open science conferences. And so in that case, it's talks that people gave, it's the administration and the planning, money that people contributed, basically anything that's relevant to the community. And obviously the community needs to decide what they consider in scope of a contribution. But we've shown that it can handle ideas, actions, resources like money. It's very universal and could handle any type of contribution. Yeah. And so it's up to the community, really.
Can't tell. Someone's so awesome. Thanks, Cooper. I had a couple things, just a few things I wanted to provide a quick overview for between the last meeting and today. I created this repo for a few, like what I would characterize as sort of one-off things that people want to do with data. And apparently what is going on here? For some reason my copy paste is not working. All right. So yeah, I created this Augur utilities repo, and there's basically 3 things in it right now. The to-do group has a repository linter that goes through and checks for all of the key characteristics like a contributing file, a README, tests, etc. And so this linter, this basically lets you run the to-do group linter across any number of Augur repositories that exist on your instance. So it basically scales the repo linter that the to-do group has if you've got an Augur instance. And then more cowbell, which I realize could be named better, but I was feeling cutesy on the day that I named it. It goes through and basically does what I call a repo reaping. This one you only need if your Augur instance is more than a year old. And what it does is, in the event that you have duplicate repositories, this little utility identifies and removes them. Kelly, hi, welcome. I see your hand just got raised, and I know what you're going to say, but go ahead.
I was gonna ask to see how the test went this weekend.
So Callie's asking about, so what this utility does is it generates a delete script for all of the repos, and it's a systematic delete script that goes through and just removes the duplicate repositories. And when Callie and I were running it in testing mode on some very large Augur instances, it's taking a long time to go through pull request reviews. And so I've been doing some testing on this one over the weekend. The latest test I did, Callie, is yesterday. I stopped the two processes that were running, and I determined that one of the issues could be that there wasn't an index on the repo ID in the pull request reviews table, which meant that that delete script had to do a full table scan, which on a large instance is fairly substantial. And so I added the creation of an index to that full table scan. I haven't gone over to my other computer yet this morning to see if it finished or not, but that's the latest development on this is the addition of that to the delete script.
Okay, great. Yeah, let me know how that all goes.
I will. And then the last one is just, there's one SQL script in here right now. Well, actually, there's two. These two scripts, check collection, just goes through and gives you how many repositories have data collection that's older than 60 days. So this is on 130,000 repo instance. There's like 3,000 that are over in the notes there. And then this one here is just a standard Postgres query that'll check to see if you've got any blocking queries running. Obviously, sometimes if you're doing a lot of different things with Augur, if you're collecting data and trying to delete data and querying data out, it's possible, especially when you're doing other operations while collecting data, you can end up with deadlocks. In the past, occasionally Augur would run into deadlocks just tripping over itself. I think there's few of those that are present now, though I cannot attest that all possible conditions where Augur sort of trips on itself don't occur. When it does trip on itself, it's most often now a function of the Postgres server being sort of underpowered, I guess I would say, for the amount of data that you're trying to collect. So there's a lot of moving parts on an Augur instance, especially as it grows over 10,000 repos. Yeah, so that's the Augur utilities thing. I just wanted to kind of introduce y'all to that and the fact that that exists. And I see somebody added how to manage GSOC new contributor influx. Is that yours, Jen?
No, I put that in there just because it seems like the Slack channel is getting pretty flooded with it. And it's usually the exact same comment each time. So I don't know if we want to just have a automatic response. I also don't know if when people add like join into a Slack channel, if they're able to see prior messages. Because if so,
They
I
are.
will have to be so honest that I'm worried that there's like a lot of like borderline bot comments. Not even bot, but just people like kind of copy pasting, not looking at anything, just saying, how do I contribute without spending 2 seconds looking at things? And I know that everybody in this group is pretty overworked. And so I'm trying to figure out the balance of supporting the new contributors coming in, but also expecting a level of look at the docs. And so I think a middle ground of that will be let's just have a automatic like pretty much have for the automatic responses that come into our channel. I mean, most of them are the same iteration of the same question of just saying, "Hi, welcome to Augur. Look at this document. Look at this document. Here you go." I think it will also be good for Google Summer of Code and for, I mean, I'm in this boat as well. It seems that there's a lot of questions on getting started of
Yeah.
like trying to work through startup issues. And so I think in best nature, and I mean, I'm also biased because I need this help, of it might be worth trying to figure out to set up like a office hours time for somebody to come in and people to like talk through Augur setup. So that it's not just like, yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to better manage the situation.
I think the office hours for new people is a good idea. We've done that in the past. I think there's a way that I can pin pin a response in the repo, and this is we kind of ventured back into Google Summer of Code this year after not after we had kind of an experience in 2022 where the students that we did accept into the program did not really spend much time on the projects, and it seemed that the sort of zeitgeist of GSOC had changed. But this year we're attempting it just to see if it's kind of back to what it was pre-pandemic. The behavior that you're describing is kind of consistent with people seeing the project, wanting GSOC, and you're right. I don't think, to your point, I don't think the people who are asking, what do I do, have looked at um, the fundamental GSOC things that we already provide. Like these are the micro tasks, here's how to get started. And I think they're just like skipping past that and just dumping a where do I begin question in, which to me, when people do that, it indicates they're not really taking any time, as you said, to understand the project, which suggests that they're probably not going to make a great GSOC contribution either, because certainly, like when I'm new to something, I try to do it before I ask a question, right? I get to my own personal point of failure or stuckness. And I agree. I don't think that's happening in many cases.
Yeah, then I think there are a lot of other like I know I think that will be worth just going through the Slack channel because I think there's also been a lot of good questions that we should like somebody trying to do like the API front end, people asking questions about setup, like those type, and so that's why it's like frustrating to have the flood of where do I go that then covers up the actual, hey, this is all the work that I did. Can I get
Yeah,
responses? So for the place that it's in Google Summer of Code, is this people like trying to do some pre-work to apply for y'all to accept them? Or
that's right. That's what,
okay, so
that,
that's why there's all these people.
yes,
Um,
that's right. That's exactly it. And there's a very defined process that they're to be following. And so when people come to the page and the first thing they ask is, what do I do? It indicates they haven't even begun to follow the process. And honestly, I don't know what to do with that because I want us to be welcoming. But when people ask that basic question, it's like, I feel like kind of a jerk if I say, maybe look at the materials already provided to get you started.
Yeah, I would say that I think that's the best response. I mean, I think it's better than like for them it's not just ignoring them, but it is you're gonna give a unfounded resp like or an unresearched response. Here's what you should like here's the document, go. Like, hi, welcome. Please read through this and thoroughly attempt so then there's just a blanket response that we can put in there for them.
So it's kind of match effort for effort kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. All right, yeah, that's a really good suggestion. So I just added a message to that effect.
I would also potentially move the ask questions for the community under everything else, because that also might be, unfortunately, people get to that very first line and they're like, ooh, I want to make sure people know that I'm in here, and are joining the Slack channel before even reading the rest of the document. Because he says high potential Google Summer of so students, you can ask questions and meet the community Slack here. Maybe move that down below, like below everything else. Um,
All right, yeah.
It also seems like for like item one, like, hey, you must complete a micro task. Here are the micro tasks. I almost wonder if it was worth like flipping the order. Like, hey, here is all the tasks. You're eventually gonna have to complete one of these. Um, because I feel like otherwise, like people might go into that being like, oh, I gotta pick one. Like they kind of maybe don't get a chance to read them all, or I don't know. Maybe that's
Even
minor.
another, moving the chat down, and like the first one being like, how do you like the links to how to set up Augur? Because before even being able to complete a micro task, you'll need to have Augur set up. So it might be good to link the documentation, which I
So,
think in general we probably need to do a,
so please complete I see.
yeah, moving the chat down. First one being like, please like have get Augur running on your running for you locally. Here's the documentation on how to do that. I think that we definitely need to improve our documentation on this, and maybe Kaio and like Adrian would be able to help out with this as well. Uh, of people needing quick start. But I think there's been a mix. I think some people have been able to get it set up quickly, and some people, including me, have not. Like,
Nice.
let me interact with the repository. I'm like,
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
I also wonder like how many of the contributors are seeing these lists of requirements and seeing it as just like a checkbox of like things that are going to be like robotically evaluated. Like you just have to post a comment and it gets checked off versus like something that's like it's like an interpersonal human process of like, hey, you're like the quality by which you do this is like kind of what's being judged.
All right, yeah, I moved that micro tasks right into the front there. Hopefully those are great suggestions. Thanks, everybody. It's I mean, candidly, it's been a little bit yeah, so maybe this will help people actually get to the micro tasks faster. I think you're right. I think we could make this more clear. And hopefully some of these changes make it a little bit easier for people to figure out. So I tried to make those changes while we were sitting here talking, and I welcome suggestions on everything else. But
yeah, I think that looks good for me. I think that'll be good for um like Sean and John, or like just Augur maintainers to kind of scroll through for some of the more actual of substance comments. Like, I know the one yesterday I want to make sure to bump is like the somebody tried to post asking questions about making an API key page,
yeah,
which like with a screenshot of like their work being done. So like those are the type of people who definitely want to make sure that response and time are given to, versus the how do I get started people.
yeah, and honestly, the Adrian, you did a phenomenal job of providing feedback to that person. You're muted, Adrian.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Was this the that was the one with like the UI stuff, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. I see exactly what Kelly's talking about here.
Yeah, that one is a little unfortunate, because that issue that the student chose was not marked for GSOC and also was not in the so it's in the backlog, and the reason it's in the backlog is because that was really meant more as like an internal issue
Yeah.
for the core maintainers to work on.
I think they did some really nice work though, John.
Yeah, and that's why it's unfortunate because they did all this work, but they based the branch off of main, and also it's not where it needs to be in terms of just like actual visually. So what I'm
Maybe
gonna do,
maybe you
I'm
could help
current,
us provide some feedback for them.
yeah, so I'm updating the issue on
Okay.
GitHub to include actual information for people who are not in the core
Yeah.
maintainer team,
And
so
this is
that
yeah. And
it's
this is
very clear.
sure. And this is kind of not unusual. Like this is, I think, really a good GSOC outcome. So even though they worked on something that maybe it was, the wrong place or whatever, it's clear they did some work. It's clear they figured out how to launch Augur. I think, so I mean, I think this is a pretty strong contribution.
Hmm.
Even,
Yeah,
so
and
a lot of
my
times
hope,
the micro tasks often don't get merged uh, because of these things that you mentioned, like it's the wrong branch or they haven't like woven themselves into the project. No, that's okay. And I would encourage you to just provide a little bit of explanation, redirection, and encouragement to them. I think early on for new contributors, it's just, it's important to be encouraging. Um,
yes, I'm planning on, so I'm updating the issue to include like actual information about what needs to be done before this can be implemented. So like which branch it needs to be based on and what are the prerequisite issues that need to be fixed before it can be added and things like that. And I'm going to follow up with that person later once the issue has been updated with substantive information. Um, which I'm kind of surprised they found this issue because you kind of have to dig for it in order to get to it. So I
well,
guess they were really looking for something to fix.
you got to go get her.
Yeah.
Sweet. I think we've got covered this pretty well. I wanted to ask Adrian how things were going on yours, like if you were able to work past some of those issues of what you were like trying to test for like the yeah.
Yeah, I've been kind of um distracted with other things and over the spring break. I've been trying to add
So
I've
is
been
your
trying to just get
starting or
Augur
ending?
running. Sorry, what?
Is your spring break starting or ending today?
It's just ending. Yeah, it was just last week. And I've been out of town for the last couple days. But yeah, it's mostly just kind of I think I've just been trying to get like Augur running. I think I had it running a while ago, but I'm trying to get it running on like current main and stuff. Um, which now that I'm hearing all this stuff about the different branches, that might not be the right thing to be doing. But
I think the
um,
current main on Docker, because you're working Docker, right?
yeah, I've just been trying to do everything in Docker Compose just to keep things isolated on my system. But
I think
um,
working in main is the best. I think that's where we have the most well, the most mature Dockerization is in main right now, I think.
yeah, but I think it's essentially just like I think I was the one who introduced the bug with I think I kind of refactored some of the Docker build process to and I think Callie noticed it made it a lot more space efficient. But also I think I ended up copying either one or both of the binaries for like either SCC and scorecard potentially to the wrong place. So I have that's why my PR is a draft is like I just changed it, but I haven't really tested it. I haven't like run that change.
Oh, okay.
So if someone else has a working instance and you're able to build and run that branch, um, that would be helpful
Yeah,
because I'm not quite sure if that's a I just fixed the one binary, so I'm hoping best case that there's an error with the scorecard or one of the other binaries, then I can also fix and then it's like okay that seems like it's a complete
I think
solution,
that's
but
probably what's going to end up happening with seeing what's happening on the like for instance the instance that's using Docker to run it versus not. I'd say that in the short term, along like myself, I want to get an instance, like try to get a good dev environment set up. I also want to be part of the solution of like Augur maintainers having an instance where Docker is set up, because for then there is a proper way for y'all to test these type of like issues that have to do with Docker. Then it's not like, oh, this works on bare metal, this works on Docker. You have a way to test in both environments, since Docker is like an accept, you know what I mean, is an accepted form. I would say a lot of the new contributors are going to go towards using Docker, and so we want to make sure that we have a place to test it, so then things like that show up in the testing realm before it gets merged.
I will say I have been impressed with how many GSOC students have been able to get everything running in Docker.
Yes, it
really,
is much easier.
really,
I think we're really close to getting past. Sorry, I've been interrupting you.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say it's a testament to the work Greg Sutcliffe did at the end of last year that it really did make things a lot easier.
Oh yeah, I think we're really at like the last like 20, like last 10% of making it really like well wrapped around. But with that, I think that it's just going to be that more and like any other contributors that come in, the contributions are going to be geared towards that setup. And so making sure that PRs are being tested on the maintainer side, and that setup as well, I think closes the is how we close this loop. And you and I have already talked about this of like talking to Greg, and because I want it like it kind of builds on from the smaller case, like between the people who are like deeply entwined into the project, making sure we have a good setup, and then having an office hours for newer contributors, because I think it is fair to like run into issues, and having a confined environment to ask questions makes it to where it also doesn't drain like people's time trying to answer
Yeah.
questions all the time.
Well, I mean, I think your suggestion of conducting some office hours for GSOC is a good one. I have done that in the past. And I think you're right. That would make a big difference in a positive way.
Also, in slightly related news to the issues I've been working on, I think my Augur instance has just started working for some reason. I don't know why, but I'm able to use the web UI without it crashing. Callie, where were you seeing? I saw you said you commented that, hey, we're seeing like thousands of these like file not found spamming. What was that interface? That is that like through the like task?
Flower.
Huh?
So you can use Flower. Flower's awesome. It's the best.
Is that just something that's like bundled as part of the Docker container stack, or is that
Yes.
something I have to
So
run
you'll
separately?
do like for mine, it's local hosted on 5555. You should be able to see in your setup. I don't know what the like what it is
The
out
port
of the
mapping.
box.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to see what port it's on just out of the box. Um,
Oh, I was looking in the Docker Compose file and I couldn't, I was trying a bunch of random ports in there, but I couldn't see that. So maybe it's probably set up somewhere separately, but
Sean, do you know on the top of your head?
I don't.
I don't think Flower is bundled with Docker Compose by default. At least it
Okay.
wasn't last
I
time I
know,
looked
yeah,
at
I
it.
know Greg created a container for it, but you're right. He may not have bundled it by default because it was causing some issues for him.
Yes. I remember that now. I don't remember what ended up happening with that.
Neither do I.
okay.
Well,
Is there any documentation on Augur on how to get Flower set up? Let's see.
I could probably find, I bet you it's buried in the repository somewhere.
it may not be because Flower is a relatively new addition.
But it's really great for being like able to see what errors and stuff are going on. I don't know if the public instance of Augur of
Yeah. Right now, the public instance isn't collecting, so
okay, so that's down.
there won't be. Yeah, the Flower is not
Would
up right now.
would those errors just show up in the Docker logs too?
Yes.
Okay.
It's pretty much just like a UI to be able to see like I can like to be able to see those errors a lot
Like
quicker.
it just stores the error, like, hey, this was the error, even though we're not collecting right now. Here's what it
Yeah,
was
I'm
last
gonna
time we
just
were
share my
collecting.
screen so then you can kind of see what it looks like.
I would
Mhm.
point out, so specifically, Flower is a utility that communicates with the Celery worker management process. So it displays only errors that occur in Celery tasks, which is not all of Augur. It's so you can find out a lot of information, which is really relevant for people who are mainly using Augur for collection. But if an error happens elsewhere in Augur, it might not show up in Flower.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is where, so it made it a lot easier for me to be like, okay, in this current state, what are the errors we're getting? And that's kind of how I was able to be like, okay, we have a couple thousand failed tasks, but they're all covered, like 95+% of them are all covered by like, oh, this is the same like three things. We could kind of see it with this. Like, we know that kind of the
Yep.
two
Yeah.
and so Flower makes it a lot easier to be able to kind of see, okay, what's going on collection wise. I can search on certain repositories and see what's failing. So pretty much all of the debugging that I've been doing in the Flower UI. But
Awesome.
that information is available elsewhere. But I definitely want to make sure that we have the documentation in Augur for the people can add
Yeah.
Flower, because I think it is a really helpful tool.
Yeah, and that's a great place to finish up because we're over time actually right now. And thanks everybody for your contributions to Augur and to this conversation. And I'll see you in Slack. Thanks for all the thoughts and ideas today. And see you in a couple weeks, if not sooner.